see you. Have a seat here.
Appreciate it.
David Metcalf is a researcher for the Institute for Simulation and Training at the University of Central Florida, and also the president of Moving Knowledge. So welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So David, I think that you have a really interesting perspective here. In the next 3 to 5 years, what will be the most significant innovation to change the way healthcare is delivered, and why?
Yeah, so I'm sure this is kind of a setup question because, as you may know, we have a new book that Rick Crone, Patricia Salber, and I just came out with. It's called Health Everything, and it's about some of the ways that wearables and the Internet of Things are changing healthcare. And that goes all the way from the patient to the provider and throughout the network. But I think what interests me most from the findings that we're coming out with, it's not about the wearables we have now, the wrist worn or other things we have. It's how health is going to surround us, just in our everyday life, whether that's in our cars, in our homes, in our offices, and in the clinical setting. And that sort of ambient health is really exciting. You know, it's not all just what we're going to have to wear or keep track of or things like that. It's how it's going to be pervasive throughout our lives.
And integrated, I'm sure, in such a way, like you said, it's ambient, that it's not even nothing that you even have to think about, is it? It's just something that's going to be there and really helping you to manage your care.
Yeah, pervasive, and that's what we're trying to kind of show here too, with the example too of everything inside of the office, the home, and wearables as well too.
Absolutely.
Settings.
Well, you hit on a theme that many of our guests have spoken to. I want to ask another one for you. How does bleeding edge technology overcome basic challenges like social determinants of health, be it education level, income, housing? What do you think?
Yeah, well, as you know, we work down in Lake Nona Medical City too, down in Orlando, and we're really privileged to have this sort of living laboratory. We have an intelligent home, we have a beautiful community, we have the largest VA hospital in the US. But really what we're trying to do as University of Central Florida, a public, nonprofit institution, is to take those high-end kind of upper echelon technologies and bring them down to the base of the pyramid as well too. So that the things that we might design in $100,000 worth of equipment in a home can eventually be $2,000, can eventually be $200, and then $80, and then the free apps, and have sort of like an anthology or a kit that comes out of the research that we do every year, which always costs a little bit more, but how do we bring that down to the lowest common denominator as fast as possible? So that's really our goal.
So let me put you on the spot just a bit. Can you give us a couple examples of maybe some pilots or some ways that you're taking that expensive technology and bringing it down to that consumer level?
Yeah, so we did a project a couple years ago in the intelligent home with a mirror that we call the Deus Health View mirror. And that mirror gave us an ability to see all of the health data. It automatically took your pulse through your cheeks.
Wow.
Through an Xbox Connect 1. It actually had a touch screen that gave you information about your health. And the use cases that we came up with Florida Blue and GuideWell were actually some of the things that showed how you could improve health and maybe have predictive analytics beforehand just by having that ambient, always-on health. Well, you can do the same thing that you can do in an expensive mirror that's full size in your own bathroom with your own mobile device, if you're willing to do that.
Sure.
So if we can bring those down as low as possible to where the same things that were in a specialized device are now in an app or a kit of some apps, that's an example of some of the types of things that we're trying to do.
Terrific. Well, great examples too. Obviously, David, you're such an entrepreneur, you're an innovator. What advice would you have for people who are breaking into the healthcare industry who really want to make a measurable change?
Well, as you know, education is our mission, and we're looking at the ways that at the university that we can drive innovation. But also we're coming up with programs that we're seeing, not just ones that we invent, but ones that we see across the country, whether it's the incubators or accelerators like you guys have done with HealthBox and others too. But they're throughout the country, so no matter what part of the country you're in. But one is emerging pretty rapidly out of Silicon Valley called iCorps. And iCorps has been adopted by the White House, NIH, and NSF as a model for lean launchpad and the lean startup culture that we might want to have. So we're trying to train up in the next 3 years 96 different companies that spin off, and any student, faculty, or just entrepreneur from the local region can do this. And there's regions set up all across the US. So we think that programs like that are going to have huge potential and really drive to that point of where are we going to innovate, how are we going to innovate, and how can we get that education in a meaningful, practical way. It's not book knowledge.
Right.
That might be important in some areas, but it's really that practical how-to. We're going to see a lot more programs like that.
You know, David, I have to ask you one question while we have you here. You know, a lot of the advice that we've heard from folks that were guests here today at the Insights Lounge include telling the entrepreneurs to really focus on the problems that most need to be solved. How is it that you're helping your startups, your community, really work through what those problems should be, and which will really lead to a commercialization point?
Yeah, so I always like to say day one, dollar one. You know, if you can actually start a business at the point when you have a customer or a customer need that you're sure of, that's a no-brainer, that's a home run. But sometimes you have to do that customer discovery to find that out. The iPorts program encourages you over 10 weeks to have at least 100 customer interviews to find out what the real pain points are, the real points of need, and then to do your minimally viable product or to start building your prototype. We have one that we had done for the military, for combat medics, and this is an example of a deck of cards that has a number of the military medical procedures in them. And it also has a mobile app that goes with it, an augmentation layer that launches a video from these. We knew from the government wanting these that they'd be successful, but they needed a way to get out to other people, to EMTs, Boy Scouts, people taking first aid. How can you do that for a broader audience? So sometimes it starts with knowing one audience and then seeing if you can expand slowly over time to those other audiences you might have a need in.
Sounds like a great process that you're leading your startups through, so wonderful. All right, I have the magic question for you. If you could magically fix one specific problem with healthcare today, what would it be and why?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I recently lost my mother-in-law. So
sorry.
This is a very personal question when I started thinking about the answer, because it's really that coordination of care that at some points in the process we're missing, and some points we're there. And for me, that's the point that we really need to get to. We can have all these gadgets and all these other things, but if we have high tech without high touch, we're really missing something.
Right.
So I would love to have the perfect product or suite of products that go along with the perfect service and operation models, and that's the innovation that I'd love to see. I heard some people talk today in the speeches that were given here at Exponential Medicine on some of the ways that you could have love in your product. I think it was Lark talking about love in your product, you know, and I thought, oh, you know, that is the missing ingredient, that sense of care, that sense of urgency, that sense of what would it be like if it was your mother or your mother-in-law, and how would you do that? And I think that if we lose that, it doesn't matter what technology we have. So that's what I'd love to see.
So I think what you just mentioned again is really keeping the human side of technology front and center. And that's another theme that we've heard so much about. And I think that you yourself are probably really helping to engender that respect for that human side in medicine with your students and with the clients that you're working with. So David, thank you so much. So glad to have had you on today at the GuideWell Insights Lounge.